This is Jennifer Blome and Wendy Weiss on KTRS.
Take this job and shove it. I ain't working here no more. A woman doesn't let.
Maybe you don't do that, but maybe you quietly quit. What does that mean? Dr. Cindy Waller, psychologist and author, and good friend of our show, and joins Wendy and me online now to talk about that. Dr. Waller, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure, and I know you appreciate my Canadian accents. I've been practicing all week long.
We were going to ask if you had been oot and a boot over the weekend.
I've been out and about.
Oot and a boot.
Out and about. Out and about.
What is quietly quitting?
So quietly quitting is actually probably not the best term. What it suggests is that employees are actually showing up at work and not working. What it really means is that employees are now putting boundaries around work and their personal and family life.
What kind of boundaries?
So I would rename it as emotional balancing. So employees now today watch their parents, previous generations, sell their soul. So it meant they were working all kinds of crazy hours in the name of compensation, title, executive ranks, and their parents were absent. And sure, they may have had material goods or other comforts from the rewards of the parents working that hard, but they also saw that this was an unhealthy lifestyle, and employees are balancing it with other values that they have around whether it's recreational, artistic pursuits, or personal family life.
When you say emotional balancing, it sounds very healthy to me because I'm part of that workaholic generation, and I often look back and think, why was I doing that?
Exactly. Why were you doing that? And part of the trend comes from, actually, it's interesting, from China, who had the 996 work ethic, which meant they were working from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. When you do the math, that's 72 hours a week. From a legal point of view, in 2021, China passed a rule that was illegal, and the employees had an expression in China called laying flat. So they protested, and the trend sort of emerged across now North America and Europe and the rest of the globe.
So, Doctor, it's not so much that they're just slackers. It's not that at all. It's that they have learned from our mistakes. Their parents, their aunts, their uncles. Is that more along the line of a precise definition?
That's precise definition. You really articulated it extremely well. That's exactly right. I have one client right now who's in a hybrid model, and what he says, he goes into work 2 days a week, 3 days at home, and what he says is that those days that he's actually in the office, he's actually worked harder than he's ever done. And it's not from the point of view of the hours that he puts in, it's that he's just more productive and uses the work from home model to do more of his creative thinking, his more innovative thinking. And so from his point of view, it's less hours, but the quality of his work and the quantity actually has risen, and at the same time has time to refuel, recharge his batteries, and have that really more of an enriched life. So employers now are the previous generation, I think, probably are the ones that labeled it as quiet quitting, and as you suggest, is a misnomer. And they need to really pay attention to what employees are saying their values are.
Well, I know we've heard stories of young people who are hired for a job and then they don't even show up. And then there's phoning it in. And that's not what quietly quitting is it?
Exactly. So that probably has always been around forever. I remember there was one story, actually. This was in Italy. There was an employee of a hospital, a public hospital in Italy, who had been on record and receiving compensation and salary for, I think it was 15 years, and he actually physically never went to work until they found out he... Wow. So there are always those characters for sure.
Well, then there are certain businesses like the news business, which I was in for decades, and you can't control your hours. If there's a news story, you stick with it, and it's not unusual to have a 9 or 10 hour day.
Exactly. And so whether it's news media, whether it's medical profession, other industries, as you suggest, there are employees now that are looking into whether this is worthwhile to them. Are they really getting a return on their investment, or should they be looking at other industries, other professions? And so there is a shift that's going on around employees that are wanting to do something different and look at what it is that they get enjoyment or passion from.
And the pandemic, how would you describe the impact that the pandemic had on this school of thought?
Great question. So the pandemic, I think, has really exacerbated it, and so exponentially put employees in the driver's seat. They now have leverage around what they want and need from their employer, and what they're looking for from their managers is to be able to feel valued. And each one of us has a different definition of what it means to feel valued. What is it that I want from my job that's going to allow me to feel that I'm motivated, engaged? Maybe I want to work on a team. Maybe I want to be an individual contributor. Maybe I want to articulate and be able to do presentations in a public forum. So managers now need to be even more sophisticated around ensuring employees are happy. And I always say that employers do exit interviews, and it's probably too late. What they really should be doing is a stay interview. What is it that keeps employees happy, and what is it that they need?
And managers, you've said before, need to be capable of giving constructive feedback in a way that people can hear it. And that is an art in itself, isn't it?
Absolutely. There's a big demand on people like myself in my profession who are teaching emotional intelligence to managers, how to actively listen, how to have empathy, how to be sensitive, how to understand individual drivers, which is, very different from a task-oriented technical manager who's looking just at output.
Well, there was a series of articles, it seemed, a couple of years ago, so well before the pandemic, about the number of corporations whose employees were so intimidated and the job market was so tight that they would never take vacations. They would absolutely never take time off. They would come in when they were sick. And that is part of our generation.
Yes.
And people who are afraid to take vacation, that stress is going to present itself elsewhere. So it does kind of make sense that children pay attention to what's happening around them.
Yes, and I know that too well, because you're right. There are lots of studies and colleagues and peers and friends who suffer from that I am aware of, and you're right. So it shows up in terms of depression, anxiety, leaves of absences, short-term disability, long-term disability. So at the end of the day, it also costs the employer a lot financially and from a productivity point of view, in addition to that person's well-being. And so now employees are putting boundaries and saying, I'm not doing this anymore. There's no return for me on it. It's not rewarding. And to what end? And there are other things in life that are important to me.
It's a lesson for us all. Dr. Cindy Waller, thank you for joining us. We'll connect everybody to your information on the Jennifer and Wendy Facebook page. So take care until next time.
We really
Thank you so much.
the Zay. Right? Maybe she hung up.
Hey, we did. Huh? Well, all right. You have a good time being out and about.
Thank you. We will be out and about, and we'll call you soon. Thanks, Dr.
Great.
Cindy. We
All right,
appreciate it.
Bye now.